Imagine for a moment trying to play a game without any rules. Or think about a society where nobody agrees on how things should work. Who makes decisions?
It would just be chaos, wouldn't it?
Exactly. Absolute chaos. In any functioning democracy, it's fundamental that even the rulers, the government, have to follow a clear set of rules. Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going deep into a really foundational concept, the Constitution.
Yeah.
Now, this isn't just some old document. It's the supreme law of a country. It defines your rights as citizens, lays out the government's powers, and dictates how the whole system should function.
It's incredibly important. It brings stability and sets the whole framework for how a nation operates.
So our mission today is to get a real handle on why we even need a constitution, how they're put together, who actually does the designing, and the core values that underpin them. We'll start by looking at a really powerful example, South Africa's journey to its constitution. Then we'll dive into our own Indian constitution. Understanding this is absolutely crucial for grasping our democracy and, of course, very relevant for your exams. And to help us navigate all the details from our source material, we have our expert speaker with us. Okay, so a constitution sounds pretty big, but let's break it down. What exactly is it at its core? What's its main job?
Right. Well, basically, a constitution is a set of written rules. And importantly, these rules are accepted by everyone living together in that country. It acts as the supreme law. It governs relationships, between citizens themselves, but also critically between the citizens and the government. It has about 4 main jobs, you could say.
Okay, what are those?
First, it builds trust and coordination. You need that when you have diverse groups of people living together. Allows them to coexist. Second, it clearly specifies how the government is actually set up, who has the power to make which decisions. Really defines the structure.
Makes sense.
Third, it sets limits on what the government can do, and it defines the rights of citizens, protects people. And fourth, it expresses the aspirations of the people. What kind of society are we trying to build here? A good society. And an interesting point here is, well, not all countries with constitutions are democratic, but, and this is key, all democratic countries must have one, usually a written one.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, this practice really took off, influenced by big events like the American War of Independence and the French Revolution. Shows how vital these rules are for ordered governance.
That definition really clarifies things, but sometimes seeing it in action helps understand the why even better. So let's turn to South Africa. That's a powerful case, right? A country that absolutely had to build its future on a new constitution. What was going on there?
To understand South Africa's need for a constitution, you have to start with Nelson Mandela, an iconic figure. He, along with 7 other leaders, was actually sentenced to life in prison back in 1964. Why? For opposing the apartheid regime. He spent 27 incredibly long years locked up on Robben Island, a truly notorious prison.
27 years. Unbelievable.
His struggle really symbolized the entire nation's fight. And that fight was against apartheid. Now, apartheid wasn't just regular discrimination. It was a unique, brutal system of racial segregation imposed by the white European minority.
How is it different from, say, India's colonization?
Well, a key difference was that a large number of whites actually settled in South Africa and became the local rulers, unlike in India where it was more about administration from afar. Under apartheid, people were rigidly divided by race. The native blacks, about 3/4 of the population, then colored people of mixed race, people migrated from India, and the ruling whites. And the system was built on treating all non-whites as inferior. They couldn't vote, for instance, basic rights denied.
And the segregation was everywhere, wasn't it?
Absolutely everywhere. Non-whites were banned from living in white areas. They could only work there if they had specific permits. Think about it. Separate trains, buses, hospitals, schools, colleges, libraries, cinemas, beaches, even public toilets. Total segregation. There's this infamous example, a sign on Durban Beach, which explicitly stated it was reserved only for the white race group.
Just appalling.
And it went further. Non-whites couldn't even worship in the same churches as whites. They couldn't form associations or protest this treatment. But people did resist. Since 1950, blacks, colored people, Indians, they fought back together. Protests, strikes, led mainly by the African National Congress, the ANC. The ANC became this umbrella group, joined by workers' unions, the Communist Party, even some sensitive whites who saw the injustice.
So there was widespread resistance internally and maybe internationally.
Yes, the world condemned apartheid as unjust, racist. But the white government clung to power violently. Detentions, torture, killing thousands of black and colored people. It was a long, hard struggle.
It just sounds like such a deeply divided society. How on earth did they manage to move from enemies, essentially, to negotiating a democratic future and a new constitution?
Well, as the protest and the struggle just kept growing, the white regime eventually started to see that they couldn't maintain control through repression forever. It was becoming unsustainable.
So they started to shift.
Exactly. They began changing policies, repealing some of the discriminatory laws, lifting bans on political parties like the ANC, easing media restrictions. And then, after 28 years, Nelson Mandela walked free from prison. A truly historic moment, which led to the moment. Midnight, 26 April 1994, the new South African flag goes up. A multiracial democracy is born. The apartheid government was officially over.
Incredible turnaround.
Mandela himself, reflecting on it later as the first president, said something quite profound. He said, historical enemies succeeded in negotiating a peaceful transition, exactly because we were prepared to accept the inherent capacity for goodness in the other. He wished South Africans would never give up on that belief in goodness.
That speaks volumes about the spirit of reconciliation.
It really does. After democracy emerged, the black leaders actually appealed to fellow black South Africans to forgive the whites for the atrocities. The goal was to build a new South Africa, one based on equality, all races, genders, democratic values, social justice, human rights. And remarkably, the party that had oppressed and the party that led the freedom struggle, they sat down together to draft a common constitution.
That must have been incredibly difficult.
2 years of intense discussion and debate. But they produced what many consider one of the finest constitutions globally. It grants really extensive rights. The key was their collaborative approach, nobody excluded, everyone part of the solution. This led to the idea of the Rainbow Nation.
The Rainbow Nation, that's a powerful image.
Mandela captured it well. He said the Constitution speaks of the past and the future. It's a pact to never repeat the racist, brutal, and repressive past, but also a charter to transform the country into one truly shared by all its people. Black and white, women and men.
That ideal is inspiring. But practically speaking, how did they make sure this wasn't just talk? How did the Constitution actually build trust and protect people after such deep wounds?
That's the crucial part where the Constitution itself comes in. The South African example shows why you need these written rules, especially in deeply divided societies. Think about it. You have the former oppressors and the formerly oppressed needing to live together as equals. Both sides had fears, legitimate interests they wanted to protect.
What were the main fears?
The black majority, understandably, wanted real majority rule, no compromises on democracy. And they needed social and economic rights, real change in their lives. The white minority, on the other hand, worried about losing their privileges, their property.
So how did they bridge that gap in the Constitution?
Through negotiation, they reached a compromise, a really significant one. The whites agreed to majority rule, the principle of one person, one vote. They also accepted basic rights for the poor and workers.
And what did the black majority agree to?
They agreed the majority rule wouldn't be absolute, meaning the majority couldn't just do anything it wanted. Crucially, they agreed not to simply take away the property of the white minority.
That must have required immense trust, or at least a mechanism to build it.
Exactly. And that mechanism was the written Constitution. It was the only way to build and maintain trust. By writing down the rules everyone agreed to abide by. Rules about choosing future rulers, the limits on government power, the rights of citizens. And crucially, these rules couldn't be easily changed by whoever won the next election. They agreed these basic rules would be supreme. No government could ignore them. That set of basic rules is the Constitution.
The South African story is incredibly powerful. It really highlights the healing potential of a shared rulebook. Now let's shift focus to India. Our journey had its own unique set of challenges, didn't it? What was the situation when India set out to make its constitution?
Oh, absolutely. India's constitution making also happened under incredibly difficult circumstances. I mean, just the task itself, drafting a constitution for such a vast, diverse country, huge. And remember, people were transitioning from being colonial subjects to citizens of an independent nation. That's a massive mental shift, too.
And then there was partition.
Exactly. The trauma of partition, based on religious differences. It was happening right then. The violence was horrific.
Yeah.
Estimates are at least 10 lakh people, that's 1 million people, killed on both sides.
Unimaginable.
Plus, another huge problem. The princely states. Hundreds of them. The British basically said they could choose to join India, join Pakistan, or, well, try to stay independent.
Creating huge uncertainty.
Passive uncertainty. So when the Constitution was being written, India's future didn't look nearly as secure as it does today. The makers felt real anxiety about the present and the future. It was a very precarious time.
So, despite these immense difficulties, almost overwhelming odds, The source material suggests there were actually some advantages India had, some paths that helped shape the Constitution positively. What were they?
Yes, that's an important point. Despite the challenges, there was a significant advantage. A broad consensus had already emerged during the freedom struggle about what a democratic India should look like.
So the groundwork was laid earlier.
Precisely. Our national movement wasn't just about kicking out the British, it was also about rejuvenating our society, transforming politics. There were differences, of course, sharp ones even, but some basic ideas had gained wide acceptance.
Like what kind of ideas?
Well, think back to 1928. Jawaharlal Nehru and 8 other Congress leaders actually drafted a sort of mini-constitution. And then in 1931, the Karachi session of the Congress passed a resolution outlining key features. Both these documents committed to things like universal adult franchise, that everyone gets a vote, rights to freedom and equality, and protecting minority rights.
So these core values were agreed upon even before the formal assembly met.
Yes, largely. That provided a solid foundation. Another advantage was, perhaps surprisingly, familiarity with some colonial institutions.
How so? Weren't they undemocratic?
They were, mostly. Voting rights were very limited, the legislatures were weak. But elections were held in 1937 for provincial legislatures. Indians gained some experience working within these structures, however flawed. That practical experience proved really valuable when setting up India's own institutions. That's why our Constitution actually borrowed quite a few procedural details from colonial-era laws, like the Government of India Act of 1935.
Interesting. So a mix of reacting against colonialism but also learning from its structures.
Exactly. And finally, all those years of thinking during the freedom struggle gave our leaders confidence. Confidence to learn from other countries, the French Revolution ideals, British parliamentary democracy, the U.S. Bill of Rights, even the socialist revolution in Russia inspired ideas about social and economic equality. But, and this is crucial, they weren't just copying. They critically examined whether these ideas fit India's unique situation. They adapted, didn't just imitate. All these factors together really shaped the making of our Constitution.
Right. So with this monumental task, dealing with the challenges but leveraging the advantages, who were the actual people involved? Who were the members of the Constituent Assembly, and how did they work?
The document itself, the Constitution, was drafted by this elected body called the Constituent Assembly. Elections for it were held in July 1946. Its first meeting was in December 1946, but soon after, partition happened.
So the assembly itself got divided.
Yes, it did. The Constituent Assembly that ultimately wrote the Indian Constitution had 299 members. They officially adopted the Constitution on the 26th of November 1949. And it came into effect on the 26th of January 1950.
Which we celebrate as Republic Day.
Precisely. Every year.
Okay, so that's the who and when. But why should we, today, accept a constitution made by an assembly elected way back in 1946 under very different circumstances? Why does it still hold legitimacy?
That's a really important question, especially for understanding its relevance today. There are 3 main reasons why the Indian Constitution commands such respect and acceptance, even now. First, it expressed a broad consensus of its time. It wasn't just the view of a few leaders. Think about it. Many countries have had to rewrite their constitutions because they didn't have broad acceptance. India's hasn't faced that.
It's endured.
It really has. No major social group or political party has ever questioned the fundamental legitimacy of the Constitution itself. That's quite remarkable, globally speaking. Second reason, the Constituent Assembly, despite not being directly elected by everyone, there was no universal suffrage, then it did genuinely represent the people of India in a broader sense.
How did that work without direct elections?
Well, members were mainly elected by the existing provincial legislatures. This system ensured a pretty fair geographical share from all regions. And although the Congress Party dominated, the Congress itself was a very diverse party back then, with many different viewpoints within it. Plus, the Assembly included many members who weren't from Congress, representing different language groups, castes, classes, religions, occupations.
So it reflected India's diversity.
Yes, quite well. It's often argued that even if there had been universal suffrage then, the Assembly's composition wouldn't have looked drastically different. And the third reason, which gives it a kind of sanctity, is the way the Assembly worked. It was systematic, open, and aimed for consensus.
How did that process unfold?
First, they debated and agreed on the basic principles. Then a drafting committee was set up.
Chaired by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar.
Yes, famously chaired by Dr. Ambedkar. They prepared a draft constitution. Then came the really detailed work, clause-by-clause discussion, thorough scrutiny. Over 2,000 amendments were considered.
Yeah.
Imagine that.
Wow, that's meticulous.
Absolutely. They deliberated for 114 days, spread over nearly 3 years, and everything was recorded, every document, every word spoken. These records are called the Constituent Assembly debates. They fill 12 huge volumes. They provide the reasoning behind every single provision, and they're still used today to interpret the Constitution, incredibly valuable for understanding the original intent, especially for detailed exam preparation.
So, beyond this incredibly thorough process, what was the driving philosophy, the soul, if you like, that guided these makers? What was their dream for India?
That's about getting into the dream and the promise, the core values. Mahatma Gandhi wasn't in the assembly, but his vision deeply influenced many members. Back in 1931, in his magazine Young India, he wrote about the India he dreamed of. An India free from thraldom and patronage, basically. Free from all forms of being controlled or dependent.
What did that India look like for him?
He envisioned an India where the poorest feel it's their country, where they have a real voice. An India with no higher, low class, perfect communal harmony, no untouchability, no intoxicating drinks or drugs, and importantly, where women will enjoy the same rights as men. He said he'd be satisfied with nothing less.
A powerful, inclusive vision.
Very much so. Then you have Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. He shared the dream of ending inequality, absolutely. But he had, perhaps, a sharper, different understanding of how deeply rooted those inequalities were and how hard they'd be to remove.
He was quite critical at times, wasn't he?
Yes, especially in his concluding speech to the Assembly. He issued a stark warning. He said on 26 January 1950, India was entering a life of contradictions.
Contradictions?
Politics would grant equality, one person, one vote, one value. But socially and economically, because of the existing structure, India would continue to deny equality, the principle of one person, one value. He asked, how long shall we continue to live this life of contradictions? If we continue to deny it for long, we will do so only by putting our political democracy in peril. A very powerful warning about the gap between political ideals and social reality.
The challenge that remains relevant even today.
Indeed. And then there's Jawaharlal Nehru's famous Tryst with Destiny speech, given at midnight on August 15, 1947.
At the stroke of the midnight hour.
When the world sleeps, India will awake to life and freedom.
He spoke of redeeming their pledge, dedicating themselves to the service of India and her people. And what did that service mean? He defined it as the ending of poverty and ignorance and disease and inequality of opportunity. He echoed Gandhi's aspiration to wipe every tear from every eye. A profound commitment.
So these big ideas, these dreams and warnings, how are they captured in the Constitution itself? They are beautifully condensed and enshrined in the preamble to the Constitution. It's often called the introduction, but it's much more. Some call it a poem on democracy. It's considered the soul of the Indian Constitution.
The soul? Why so?
Because it lays out the entire philosophy, the guiding principles. It's the standard against which you can judge any government law or action. It encapsulates that shared vision we talked about. Let's quickly look at the key terms. They're vital.
Yes, let's break those down. They often appear in exams.
Right. It starts, we, the people of India. That's crucial. It means the Constitution's authority comes from the people, not a king or some outside power. Sovereign. India makes its own decisions, internally and externally. No outside power dictates. Supreme authority. Socialist. This was added later, in 1976, by the 42nd Amendment. It means wealth should be shared more equally, and the government should regulate the economy to reduce inequality.
Okay, added later. What else?
Secular. Also added in 1976. Means citizens have complete freedom of religion. There's no official state religion, and the government respects all beliefs equally. Democratic. Means people have equal political rights, they elect their rulers, hold them accountable. Government follows basic rules. Republic. Means the head of state, the president is an elected person, not a hereditary monarch.
Got it. And then the values.
Yes. Justice. No discrimination based on caste, religion, gender. Social inequalities must be reduced. Government should work for everyone's welfare, especially the disadvantaged. Liberty. Freedom of thought, expression, belief, faith, worship. No unreasonable restrictions on what citizens think, say, or do. Equality. All are equal before the law. Traditional social inequalities must end. Equal opportunity for everyone. And finally, fraternity. Means we should all behave like members of the same family, promote brotherhood. No one should treat a fellow citizen as inferior.
These are incredibly powerful concepts, but just to make it concrete, could you give a quick, everyday example of how, say, justice or fraternity actually works under the Constitution?
Sure. Take justice. It means, for example, if a student applies for a government job or admission, They cannot be rejected just because of their caste or religion. The Constitution ensures there are ways to fight such discrimination. And it also supports things like reservation policies, aiming to provide opportunities to historically disadvantaged groups to reduce those social inequalities. That's justice in action.
Okay, that makes sense. And fraternity.
Fraternity is about that feeling of common brotherhood. In a diverse country like ours, it means respecting different cultures and religions, trying to resolve conflicts peacefully, seeing each other as fellow Indians first. It encourages treating everyone with dignity like you would your own family members, fostering national unity. So these aren't just words on paper. They're meant to guide how we live together.
Right. So the Constitution clearly lays out these high ideals in the preamble. But it's also a practical rule book, right? How does it translate these values into, well, the actual running of the country, the institutional design?
Exactly. A constitution isn't just philosophy. It's about turning those values into concrete institutional arrangements. How does the government actually work? A large part of the Indian Constitution deals with these very arrangements. That's why it's such a long, detailed document. It sets up the parliament, the judiciary, the executive, defines their powers and relationships.
Oh, it's not set in stone, is it? You mentioned amendments.
Absolutely crucial point.
Yeah.
The makers knew society would change, aspirations would evolve. So they didn't see the Constitution as sacred, static, and unalterable. They specifically built in procedures for constitutional amendments. This allows the Constitution to be updated over time, to stay relevant, to reflect people's aspirations and changes in society. It's designed to be adaptable.
So it lays out the how.
Yes. It lays down the procedure for choosing who governs, defines the powers clearly who can do what, and very importantly, sets limits on government power by guaranteeing fundamental rights to citizens. Rights that cannot be easily taken away.
We've certainly covered a lot of ground. From the basic need for rules, through South Africa's powerful journey of reconciliation and constitution making, to the immense challenges and visionary thinking behind our own Indian Constitution, and its enduring values laid out in the preamble. It's clear this isn't just a legal text.
Not at all. It's a living blueprint.
As you reflect on our discussion today, remember that the Constitution isn't just history collecting dust on a shelf, it's a living guide. It shapes your daily life, it guarantees your freedoms, provides the framework for our society. Understanding it is vital, yes, for your exams, but more fundamentally for being an active, informed citizen in our democracy. These rights come with a responsibility to understand and uphold the principles behind them. Stay tuned for more exam-ready insights and continue your preparation with us.
In this deep dive, we covered the following topics: the concept and purpose of a constitution, the democratic constitution in South Africa, including the struggle against apartheid and the path towards its new constitution, the making of the Indian Constitution, detailing its difficult circumstances and the significant advantages in its path, the Constituent Assembly of India and the reasons for its enduring legitimacy, the guiding values and philosophy of the Indian Constitution as articulated by its leaders and enshrined in the preamble, along with a detailed explanation of its key terms like sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic, republic, justice, liberty, equality, and fraternity. And finally, the concept of institutional design and the importance of constitutional amendments for adaptability.